it's where most people are retiring, like age somewhere in that range. That's where the average of Congress is, and that's just crazy.
It's very bizarre to me that somebody who is doing things that normal people do is suddenly not eligible to represent the people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Social Discord. I am your host, Dalen Turk.
I'm Kara Tebow.
And I'm Curtis Medina.
Episode 5, guys. How crazy is that? We're already moving along.
Yeah,
let's go.
We're becoming pros.
We do our best. So
I got my new podcasting mic.
Curtis is on a new mic. I'm actually the only one in the studio right now. Kara had to take care of some stuff at her home, so she's also joining us remotely. But that's okay.
I am using 2015 Beats by Dre headphones. I was not paid to say that.
Does Beats really need any more promotions right now? All right.
Are all Beats by Dre, or is it just some Beats by Dre?
Beats trademark, copyright, patent.
To be
Dre.
fair, didn't he sell Beats to like Sony or something?
I'll have to dig back into the archives of 2014, 2015 news, and I'll get an answer for you.
He sold Beats by Dre, I think, to Sony for like $3 billion. It was something absurd. All right, so today we're going to be talking about young people and politics, and hence the title, The Young and the Political, which I love. I think that's a great title. But before we go into the subject, since I said we are 5 episodes in, if y'all could do us a favor, I hope you've been listening along, go ahead and go on Apple Podcasts, you can go on the website, podcastwithoutborders.com. You can also go on Spotify or whatever podcast app you may use. Write us a review, give us a rating, let us know what you think, let us know what we can improve on, let us know what you like. It helps us grow as a show, really hone into what y'all enjoy and what we enjoy and what we do well. So if you could just write us a review, give us a rating, so that way we can help improve and just help grow as a podcast. And that also helps us climb up the charts, and hopefully we'll get a sponsor in the future. Never know what happens. But with that being said, with the housekeeping done and over with, let's go ahead and head into today's topic, which is, as I said, young people and politics. So Curtis, I know obviously this show is shown through a millennial perspective, and right now that is something that a lot of people argue is missing in today's political environment. So why don't you take us into the topic and let us know kind of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, this topic started in my mind back in 2016 when Trump won. I had a former teacher that is a friend of mine on Facebook basically blame millennials. She said, well, if you guys had come out and vote. She said
blame millennials?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no, that's basically what she said. And, and I was kind of more of the, like, your generation's the one who voted for Trump, but then she pointed out correctly, your generation didn't come out at all. So it kind of goes back to that where, like, I started thinking back then, why is it that older people are so passionate about voting? Is it something that just happens when you hit a certain age with every generation? When you have to start paying taxes more or whatever, you get more involved? Or is it something actually in the DNA of every generation, that maybe for baby boomers or for the greatest generation or silent generation, there's something that when they were growing up, they felt like their vote mattered more. If something needed changing, they would rush into it more than maybe millennials do. So then the question became, why don't we? Why don't millennials? Why aren't we more a part of the political spectrum? And it's a complicated subject, and that's what I think we should talk about today.
And it's funny we talk about the idea of politics. It's older people, middle-aged people, it's, what they do. We see Congress and we just see all this gray hair everywhere. But it's funny, you think back to the Revolution and, the founding fathers were all pretty young. You look at
in their 30s, 40s. Some of them, like there was an article I was reading that basically said some of the founding fathers were founding teenagers.
Right? I mean, you look at, so the oldest, so we're looking at this list, and it's allthingsliberty.com, and it has, and it's Journal of the American Revolution, and it's Ages of Revolution. How old were they on July 4th, 1776? And it's written by Todd Andrlik, possibly. And so in the list, they have the very last person, who is Samuel Whitmore, who was 81, and then the second oldest was Benjamin Franklin, who at the time was 70 years old. But then you look at people, you know, I mean,
The vast majority of everyone else was so much younger.
oh yeah, so the average age for our founding fathers was, I think, 44, if I'm correct.
Correct.
And then you had people who didn't play a major role but were participating in the revolution. For example, Andrew Jackson, who I believe was a courier at the time, was 9 years old. And so it's
doing
just,
his part at 9 years old.
you know, and then you have Alexander Hamilton at the time of the signing of the, I guess, Declaration of Independence, Constitution, whatever that was. I guess Declaration of Independence, right?
Yeah, I believe the Declaration.
Was 18 years old, which is wild.
That's crazy.
And he's an amazing rapper. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, right. I guess that makes sense. I mean,
And-
he's 18.
And most people don't know this, but he was Hispanic. If you're not aware, we are referencing the intensely just award-winning Broadway show Hamilton, as created by
If you are
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, you know, I mean, so, you know, a lot of these people, you know, they were teenagers essentially, and they were fighting for their life, fighting for their country. And you know, it kind of begs the question, like, you know, if there's anyone out there in their, you know, they're 18, they're in their 20s, if they're elder millennial and they're in their 30s, you know, and you feel like you can't, you know, add to the debate or you know, join politics, like, it's a great way to then get motivated, look back at some of these great people, and realize that, no, you know, they didn't have white hair like you saw, you know, in all the portraits of them, when they were actually doing the most important parts of founding the country.
I mean, think about it this way. We have, you know, arguments in the U.S. Supreme Court about constitutional issues. We're arguing about things or talking about things or upholding things that were written by 18-year-olds when they're founding our country. Like, they're pretty important people.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny too, because the picture that everybody sees of George Washington, he's kind of got, you know, he's a little bit stern, he's got his upper lip up, and, you know, he's just like really noble. He's got, you know, kind of his cheeks are starting to sag a little bit. But that was in 1797.
That was the end of his career.
Right? But that's what everybody sees of George Washington. And so you look at the picture of him painting of him from 1776. And, like, he was a young guy, and, you know, it's similar. It's similar to, you see, you know, people, and they had brown hair, but they were, you know, powdered white if they weren't already wearing wigs, you know. So I don't know if it's, I guess I don't know the culture of the powdered wig thing. I don't know if that's like to make it that people look more noble. I don't know, but then I also
it was to make them look more noble and older.
Kara, do you know?
Yeah.
They wanted to look older.
I think it was a tradition carried over from the UK Parliament.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Respect, I believe. I literally could have just lied to you, but I'm pretty sure that's
no. I think you're right. I mean, if actually even modern day in the UK, they wear white.
Right. It's essentially a uniform.
And so I do wonder too if they just, I don't know what, like, the like mortality rate, I don't know what that, like, the average age of, you know, someone's death at that time was, but I wonder what that played in the role of younger people, you know, holding power.
I mean, you didn't have time to wait.
Right.
Okay.
It was like they were living on dog years back then, basically.
Right. I mean, you know, the whole thing with, like, how we've set different ages for different offices that you can hold, like the fact that, like, you can't be the president until you're 35, like that was like, you know, that was old age basically back then. You know, it was assumed you had quite a bit of experience, and, you know, you were lucky if you lived another 20 years after that.
And so I'm looking up, I had a list, but I can't remember. So running for the like running ages. I know obviously president is 35. Running for Congress running for Senate, I believe, is 30. I thought I had this somewhere. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have it up here. Hold on one second. This is the one that, let's see. Okay, here it is.
Okay. So yeah, what are the ages for running for office in the United States?
Let's see. So the Senate is 30 and the House is 25. And actually, before I started looking this up, like I actually didn't know that there was any age restriction on Congress. I knew about
Really?
the one for the president. I had no idea. So I mean, I think the idea is that, you want to have at least a little bit of experience by the time you do it. So I think it's kind of meant to be a protection. But what we have is a lot of people who might be really good at politics and they want to get into it or whatever. Like they're basically forbidden from really taking it seriously until they're, in their mid 20s or early 30s. It's kind of a shame because by the time they're really good at it, they're almost aged out. And that's kind of, I think, what we're running against with Congress right now. I think what the average age of Congress, what was it again? It was like 67 or something like that.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah. It's where most people are retiring, like age somewhere in that range. That's where the average of Congress is, and that's just crazy. We don't have an equal representation of different generations. So I think there's a feeling of from people under 40 that there's a disconnect between what is actually what you want your country to look like and how you want your country to run and how the country is being run, because one generation is running the government and yet 30 something percent of the country are millennials or younger.
Kara, what are your thoughts on that, disproportion between the average age of Congress and, the actual population of the country?
Yeah, I think about this question all the time because I know growing up, I heard a lot, well, politicians need to be older because they've lived more life. And so that was kind of instilled in me of, well, you need to live more life to know what you're doing. But then I see people like AOC, or I see people my generation just getting really involved with canvassing, and a lot of my friends working for campaigns. And I'm like so excited. I'm like, these people are so excited and they're so passionate. So why shouldn't they have a say? I mean, we're affected by a lot of policies that go on right now. So yeah, I mean, why shouldn't we have a dog in the fight?
Absolutely. And I mean, and I think that same argument goes for a lot of different types of people. Whether you're a person of color, whether you're a woman, whether you're gay, all kinds of different, whether you're Latino, Asian, like, the demographics of who is in office does not at all match the demographics of the country. Now, of course, you don't necessarily have to, your representative doesn't have to necessarily be of your race or sexuality or sex to do a good job to represent you, but at the same time, like, shouldn't there be some kind of more equal representation of people, and wouldn't that essentially fix the problem in Congress?
And I will say, I think younger voters are becoming more aware of the fact that it all starts on a local level. You're so frustrated sometimes with people you see in the Senate or people in Congress. You're like, why are these people making decisions for me? Then it's like, well, you got to turn out. Like, your city council becomes your mayors become your congressmen and women and your senators. And so I think I hope there's starting to be kind of recognition of that. Like, oh yeah, I got to turn out for these local elections because they're going to represent me later, because you can't complain if you're not going to go to the ballot box, in my opinion. And so that's one great way for young people to get involved.
And so aside from the voting aspect, the actual, running aspect. So we have this pewresearch.org. It's, they have this article. It's Who Runs for Office, a Profile of the 2%. And basically the 2% comes from the stat that 2% of Americans say they have ever run for office. And They have some percentages here. So one, pointing at women. Women who serve in office continue to be underrepresented at all levels, which is just absolutely true. It goes in pretty much every professional environment, which is just terrible. But 20% of U.S. senators are women, as are 18% of the House. At the state level, only 10% of governors and 24%, 10% are governors and 24% of state legislators are women. And then we look at the balance of, white people versus Hispanic. Where is it? The similar balance race. So non-Hispanic whites make up 66% of American adults, and according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the 2012 American Community Survey, 82% of those who say they ever ran for office were white. And so
that was a staggering
it's
statistic.
just so dominant. And, for contrast, non-Hispanic blacks made up 12% of the adult population, but only 5% of office seekers. And similarly, 15% of U.S. adults are Hispanic, while only 6% of the adults who ever run for office are Hispanic.
So basically what that means is that, only 2% of the overall population have ever run for office. So already it's a embarrassingly low number of people who are involved in politics or even try to be involved in politics. And of those, like you said, like a crazy number of people are of one demographic, of one socioeconomic range, and the others just don't seem to be, they don't seem to make the connection between what running for office could do for them as a reward,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like helping their community, helping, people like them. There's a huge disconnect there.
And you look at specifically the millennial population, it's the most diverse generation the country's ever seen. And so I wonder because right now, and this is from, where is it? This is a Q&A on, from The Intelligencer. It was a Q&A with the author of, she wrote The Ones We've Been Waiting For. It's Charlotte Alter. She's a writer and journalist. And she pointed out that basically you have, the silent generation, which is anyone born from, I believe it's like 1927 and 1945. You have baby boomers, 1945 to 65. And then you have Gen X, which is 65 through 80. And then millennials are 80 through 96. And then 97 to like 2003 or whatever is Gen Z. And you have, when you have the average age of Congress at 67, you have all these people who had lived these lives, lived in this world that millennials never experienced. And if you pay attention to politics, so many of the people that hold office try to create laws that keep the world that they have lived in. And
yeah, status quo is a huge thing in pretty much both parties. It's a little bit more, I think, like ingrained into the Republican Party about either keeping the status quo or going back to a time that was better.
yes,
But both parties essentially do it at this point, and that's why Biden isn't all that exciting as a candidate.
Well, and it's because ever since the infamous switch of Democrat and Republican, and I guess when did they switch? Like in the early
would have been like
1900s civil rights area, and they switched, and that's when Democrats became just progressive. Like, let's move forward. Let's moral change is a necessity for a functioning and progressive society, whereas Republicans were like, let's not change much. Let's not have the government interfere with our lives.
They wanted less government, and they wanted more protection for business owners. And at that time, business owners were all white. So guess what? They were against equality in a lot of states. Not all of them, but definitely certainly in the South. And it wasn't always necessarily that because they were racist. A lot of it was even if they weren't necessarily racist, a lot of it was that they wanted to preserve their line or whatever, their socioeconomic place.
I think, unfortunately, over time as well, those ideals created a lot of systemic barriers for people who weren't straight white men to join politics, and a lot of internalized things. I say that primarily as a woman in general. You when you walk into a boardroom, as a woman, you kind of make sure you're toning down what you're saying. You soften your opinions on things, and you think, oh, well, no one's going to really take me seriously as a woman. Very often, they're going to take men more seriously. And so I think women going into politics feel that way. Maybe young people going into politics feel that way. And then we've just done a lot as a society to make it very, very uncomfortable to see anybody but straight white men running for politics. And Hillary Clinton, actually, she, in her book, What Happened, she released it in 2017, I believe. She said, it's not customary to have women lead or even to engage in the rough and tumble of politics. It's not normal, not yet. So when it happens, it often doesn't feel quite right. That may sound vague, but it's potent. People cast their votes based on feelings like that all the time. And I think that's such a great point, because whenever we see someone, maybe it's a Muslim woman or, someone who's 24 running for some type of political seat, it doesn't feel quite right to us because we're not used to it. And I bet that has a lot of influence.
That's true. And then at the same time, we complain when, come election, actually, when we're not past the primary, we're actually electing someone, that everyone's alike, that, Biden is so similar to Trump in so many ways, or whatever, or that Hillary Clinton was so similar to Trump in so many ways, things like that. We complain, when we elect people who are, basically carbon copies of each other. And yet we're the reason that that's happening, because we're unsure about voting for somebody who has a name that's different than ours, or voting for a woman versus a man.
I think we have to reconcile about the fact that there's a lot of internal biases that we don't realize we have yet, and that's probably getting in the way of a lot of progressive politics.
And so, coming off of those biases, AOC was the youngest person ever to go into Congress at 28 years old, right, at the time?
I'm not looking at it right in front of me, but I think that was right.
27 and 28, yep.
And so, infamously, there was a video that came out of her on like a rooftop dancing with her friends, and the GOP just went off saying that, she wasn't fit for Congress. Look at, this young person out here just, dancing and having fun, not being serious. Kara, what are your thoughts on those critiques? How does that affect younger generations who are, we still have social lives, we still have friends, we're allowed to have friends, we're allowed to have social lives, yet we're not taken seriously because of it. And I guarantee you, you look at some of those older generations in Congress, I think they were probably doing some of those things when they're, 25 years old.
That is exactly what I think. I think, first of all, the double standard, because when it's a young woman of color dancing, she's unruly and unfit. But when it's, a white male, George Bush doing cocaine or, whatever you're doing, then it's boys will be boys. It's
boys will be
club.
Boys. Yeah.
It's like, so is there a window then that you have to stop doing what's quote unquote deemed unfit for a politician? I think there's a lot of double standards. And it's very bizarre to me that somebody who is doing things that normal people do is suddenly not eligible to represent the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and especially, in a climate where, it's okay for the president to be divorced all these times, to, be a womanizer. Like, at this point, all of this, like, prejudgment of morality, like, in order for somebody to even could be considered to run for office or whatever, I think is pretty much out the window. If it ever, it's not that it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, like, it's a huge double standard. The other thing too is like, I'm a big believer in, you should be respectful for people who are, you say, are in Senate or, or president or something, of course, because it's a hard job. At the same time, like, I don't think we should treat these people like celebrities. And that's what we tend to do.
Absolutely.
A lot. The problem is that, we probably shouldn't have people that are politicians their entire life. We should remember that they're public servants first,
Mm-hmm.
And that, they have a job to do for some period of time, and then they have real lives, so our expectations have to adjust to, to probably the the reality that it's so expensive and time consuming to run for any kind of office that, that we shouldn't expect these people to be perfect angels, and never go out and party or whatever, and never go out and have real lives. We should remember they're real people.
I mean,
100%.
look at Obama when, he was in college. Like he's known for having, partaken in the deviled lettuce when he was in school. And that's okay. Like it is what it is. It was college, but I don't know.
It's really interesting because that the obsession with political figures, moral compass and their personal lives is a very American thing. In France, for example, they don't care what you do. They just care what you're doing when you're in the office. French people
Right.
found it very, very bizarre that we all cared so much about Bill Clinton's affairs. They were like, why do you care? Like, what does that have anything to do with the actual work he's doing in the office?
Yeah, if it's not costing jobs, like what does it have to do with anything?
Right. Yeah, it's a very American thing. So why can't we just judge them on what bills they're passing or their voting record? Why I don't get judged for my personal life at work. You know what I mean?
Well,
Hopefully
and
not.
you can, and so we say that about AOC, we say that about Obama, but someone who supports someone, for example, like Brett Kavanaugh, they're gonna, we've seen it, the argument by Republicans saying, well, why does it matter, what happened at a party, 40 years ago when he was in high school?
Right.
And
well,
so
it's not that it never matters. It's just that it can't matter more than it would the average person,
Right.
Like in other words, like with Brett Kavanaugh, he was being accused of rape, correct?
Not rape, sexual misconduct. I think he yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I guess it depends how she felt about it. Yeah.
I guess that's
Right.
true.
So I mean that's not okay.
Sexual
for
assault,
anyway.
we'll say.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to get it confused with like defend, saying I am not doing the like boys can be boys kind of thing. I'm not doing that at all, but I'm just saying that like, a normal healthy young life shouldn't be criticized, but yes, we should criticize somebody who is accused of, a gross misconduct and is trying to run for a major office. That's not protected under a personal life. I'm sorry.
And I guess to be fair, Supreme Court, you're not, running for election, you're appointed by the president. So it's not the perfect example of election, but it is a good example of the scrutiny that, we're talking about.
But Congress has to approve it, and
Yes.
we vote for Congress. So the check and balance on that is supposed to be like, if they screw up and they put in a Supreme Court justice that is completely unfit for that job, we are supposed to vote out that Congressperson that voted that for that. So that's kind of the check and balance. And real quick, about going back to France, and somebody mentioned that, like, about how, they perceive us as being kind of like, kind of stuffy, I guess, and kind of like caring about the wrong thing. Guess what the age of that you have to be elected to the lower house of parliament in France is?
Would you tell?
I'm going to say 18.
It's 18.
Wow.
Yeah. 18 years old, and it was mostly that across the board. I think it was 24 years for the Senate, and then this is really funny. The minimum age for the president of France. You guys want to give a guess at this?
28.
18.
Okay, there has to be somebody get a book on this. There has to be something aligning with that we care so much about who someone is and what they've experienced in life, and we don't give enough of. Hey, what can you bring to the table, and what do you want? What's your voting record?
This just makes me think of Parks and Rec when Ben Wyatt became the mayor of his town at 18, and he created Ice Town and has like completely burned the town's budget, and it haunts him for the rest of his life.
See, there's literally a storyline about that in our American comedies. Like, we are so obsessed with the fact that young people are irresponsible politicians.
And Curtis mentioned this before. We were debating the idea of, lowering the ages of voting, lower the ages of, when you can run for office. And I think you can run for like most local offices at the age of 18.
State offices.
Well, I think like state legislators, you have to be, I think, at least 21. And some, but anyways,
it depends by state. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it makes you wonder if the option is there and the opportunity is there, will it create more incentive for, even though, we're probably not going to elect an 18-year-old, state legislator, will it create the incentive that, maybe younger people need to get more involved with politics, because I mean, it's hard to get past the stigma that, when all you see is Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi at, like 77 and 80 years old, that young people can get involved.
I want to talk about something really quickly that is a massive barrier.
Go ahead.
Curtis, you mentioned a little bit ago, you said it's very expensive, kind of to get into politics and to run for office.
Absolutely.
That is a huge barrier. There was one of the first Latina Texas Congresswoman, her name is Veronica Escobar. She talked about this a lot. She was basically said that, there was a great article in Politico called Woman Who Rule Congress. And she basically said when she got into this, her biggest fear was her inability to raise money, because everyone from DC was saying, can you get the money? Can you get the money? And she was like, I don't know. And they were like, well, you need to get people, $5,000 here, $2,000 here. And she was like, I don't know anybody that can donate more than like $20. Like, she was like, that's not my circle of people, especially as, a woman of color. And so that's a huge barrier for young people. It's like, do you guys know anyone off the top of your head that could be like, here's your check for $10,000, go start printing those lawn signs.
Right.
You have to have money to get into politics. And I wonder if it's like that everywhere else. I don't know the answer.
It's interesting. You say, oh, well, a bunch of people give me $20. And then you look at the contrast of that at, Bernie Sanders, who had the most, donations of like $20 or less. But unfortunately,
the most donations ever.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like nobody has the clout and the outreach that he does.
I mean, to be fair, he created it, though.
That's true. And he
created a social revolution.
He built it
but he didn't. I don't like that narrative of like, his grassroots started with $20 here and there. Like Bernie Sanders is still like a very wealthy person, and he started from that platform. It's like my parents gave me a loan thing, and it was an incredible movement.
Who was it? Kylie Jenner was the first the youngest self-made billionaire.
Just to answer your question from before, as far as like how old it, like you said, they probably wouldn't get elected at 18 or whatever.
Right.
I'm not sure if you say it like Sarah or Sarah Blaire. She said the story is about how she became a media sensation in November 2014 after the 18-year-old Republican won a seat in the West Virginia House of Delegates. The college freshman at West Virginia University was interviewed by outlets ranging from Washington Post and Times Magazine to Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue.
So it has happened, and it could happen.
Curtis, I want to ask you a question. So in some of my readings, and I'm spacing on what article it was. And I think it is this one. It's the Liberal Millennial Revolution. And they talk about, and it's from The Atlantic, and they talk about the idea that millennials and younger people basically get involved in politics through issues. They don't get involved to be part of politics. Like, it's not the idea that, I want to be a senator because I want to be a senator. It's, I want to be a senator, or I want to vote, or I want to protest for this issue. And then as soon as, for example, as soon as Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race, who is such an intensely issue-driven candidate, a lot of millennials lost interest. So what are your thoughts on, issue-driven candidacy, by millennials?
Yeah, I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and that's exactly what happened when he dropped out of the race. I'm still going to vote, and I still care. I still don't want Donald Trump to continue. But at the same time, like, it's no longer about the issues anymore. It's about, it's going to be about Donald Trump. It's going to be about, a couple of really wide, maybe, I don't know, basically party politics again. We're going right back to that, and that really doesn't interest me, because I'm not a big fan of Democrats or Republicans at this point. I don't really care who's in office as long as they are representing the issues that I care about. And I think that that's a really good explanation of why a lot of millennials are starting to get into politics, are starting to care. But it's a real blow when the people that were pushing the most interesting ideas couldn't get past, into the final round. And if I was to run for politics, I would definitely be running on an issue rather than just being like, I want to be a Democrat or I want to be a Republican. Like, I would run on something that matters to me, say like closing privatized prisons, things like that, so, stuff that really matters.
Taking a stance.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of, things that, I think there's a lot of reasons that keep you motivated after it gets difficult, when you're running. If you don't have a really passionate subject that you're fighting for, then I'm not really sure why you would continue. And the people who would continue without a really passionate subject are not the people you want, representing you. There was a Democrat in Montana that was running a few years ago, and I met him at a benefit thing. It was really small. And I got a chance to talk to him. I asked him what his issues were, and he listed a couple things kind of offhandedly. And then I asked him about a few other things. He gave me some really lame answers. And I realized, I was like, not only is this guy not going to win, but he doesn't deserve to win. He doesn't really care. I don't know why he's running. And that's super devastating to somebody who cares about politics and is really hoping that he would be of the stance to take charge.
This is just a mark for me right now. There's from The Atlantic, there's a video, and it's the guy who wrote the article talking with somebody. Kara, are you back?
I did not like that.
Kara accidentally left us for a moment. But I'm just going to edit this video in because it's a nice little interview. It's Why Do Millennials Love Bernie? And they go into just a little bit of the idea of why millennials would run, and if they're not running, why is it that Bernie attracts them to vote?
We're hearing a lot about this whole idea that Bernie Sanders is really energizing and great for specifically millennials, and they're on the brink of a radical revolution. So I kind of want you to fact check that for me.
This generation of young people is absolutely more liberal than the rest of the country and than previous generations of young people. Both in terms of social policy, they tend to be to the left of the country, and in terms of economics. And this is a generation that really came of age at a time when it was difficult to make money. They graduated with high student debt, didn't make a lot of money after they graduated from college, if they could even find a job.
What's the prevailing theory to explain this kind of sentiment in millennials?
One interesting political theory that might explain why this group is really, really behind Bernie is this idea of the revolution of rising expectations. That expectations for this group have accelerated faster than reality has caught up. And so you think about, this is the group that said, I'm going to college so that I can get a great paying job. And a lot of them haven't been able to find a job, and if they have, maybe it's been at a really low wage. It's a group that got really excited about Barack Obama in 2007 and 2008, when he promised to sort of unite the country around his vision of politics, and that clearly hasn't come to fruition. So I think that you have not necessarily a lot of discrimination, but a lot of disappointment among Bernie Sanders' core group of supporters. And it's that disappointment that's sort of motivating them.
So there's also kind of this parallel here compared to Obama in 2008, where we had young voters who were really excited about this potential for change around a candidate. So tell me more about the parallel of Obama and Bernie, and what happens if Bernie wins?
So it does seem possible that Bernie Sanders just walks down the path that Barack Obama already trailblazed, which is a liberal that young people love, being stymied at every turn in Washington and creating more resentment about the system being broken. That does seem to me to be a possible future if Bernie Sanders becomes president.
What if Bernie Sanders doesn't win the nomination? Do we think that millennial voters are going to gravitate toward Hillary Clinton, or what do you think is going to happen?
I think you're going to have some people who are never going to vote for Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, and so they'll vote for Hillary Clinton if they go to the polls in November. But they also might just not go to the polls. It's possible that the only person keeping them in this entire presidential election is Bernie Sanders. And so once he leaves, they'll just fade away. And so I do think that Hillary has a turnout problem, an excitement problem among young people, particularly when she's being beat 4-1 by Bernie Sanders in these early primaries, the early caucus. So yes, some, but not all.
I mean, I think that a big part of it was like a lot of people, a lot of Democrats complained that his biggest negative was that he wasn't a true Democrat. And I used to say that's his best attribute, not his worst, that he aligns with a lot of Democratic ideas, but he also, doesn't just vote along party lines, and that, he could actually work with, merging our country, back together and all that. So.
Well, and it's interesting. So the millennial generation is by far, a liberal generation. But it's also, I think, one of the most nonpartisan. Like, I think if you talk to most millennials, they aren't going to say that they're, Democrat or Republican, and they may say, more so independent or, maybe something different.
Well, like a friend of mine says that he leans Republican, but his version of Republican is a lot softer and toward some of the more rigid issues that older Republicans tend to really fight for, like, say, marijuana, legalization or something like that. Most young Republicans I've talked to, they might want lower taxes or something, but they don't give a crap whether or not, people are smoking a plant.
Do you guys remember that? Did you hear that line from every business kid in school? And it was like, well, I'm socially liberal but fiscally conservative.
Oh my God, yes.
Like every college kid ever. Yeah.
That's everyone's way of trying to say, well, I'm not a Republican, but.
Yeah.
Right.
But my mommy and daddy want lower taxes.
Right. but one of the things I was surprised about was that, like, how few colleges feed into the majority of people who end up running for office, especially president and like the really high offices. It's sort of it's become kind of it's almost like a family business for a lot of these people that their grandfather was a congressman, so they want to do it, and that's great. Like, I don't want to like discourage that, because of course you should look up to your family, but at the same time, like, I'm worried that the lack of variety, lack of people who even would think about trying to run for something, is maybe that's the reason it's so small, is because we don't include this in your average college or even your average like high school, about this idea of like, you don't like something, get involved, or you like something, you want to keep going, get involved. My biggest goal with this episode is that somebody is listening out there and they're on the verge of running for something, and they're going to hear this and they're going to be like, you know what, I should run. There's no reason I shouldn't, and then to push them over the top.
I wonder if the negativity that so many Americans have against politicians and the idea that, politicians are corrupt and they're, not good people and they don't do anything. I wonder if there's this kind of like counterculture, thing happening where young people don't want to become the issue.
Sure.
It's a possibility.
I mean, politicians are under a huge amount of scrutiny. So every time you see, an article about AOC dancing on the top of a rooftop, you're like, do I want an article about me? Dancing with my friends or whatever. I mean, it's all meant to discourage people from even trying.
But what's interesting too is the millennials, I would argue, are also the creators and founders of cancel culture. Like, we hold people accountable like no tomorrow. So it's like, I mean, our generation is obsessed with holding people accountable. And for the most part, that's a really good thing. Sometimes I think it can go a little far, in my opinion.
Oh,
yeah. But
there's a difference between holding someone accountable and internet shaming, though.
Well, and it's the whole idea of like, okay, like what you did was wrong. What you did was in bad light. We need to hold you accountable for it. There's a difference between that and, we don't like that, therefore we're going to cancel you.
Yeah, or we don't even know enough about what was going on in the moment.
And we're
going to look at a meme and we're going to make a 2-second decision that your life should be ruined.
That line has become so blurred.
And so I really wonder how that's going to translate at all to politics moving forward with our generation, because I feel like we do hold people accountable quite a lot, which means we also need to hold ourselves accountable, right?
And it's interesting in that Q&A with Charlotte Alters, I think it was Charlotte Alter. She talked with a lot of millennial Republicans, as I was saying, which has changed, which is drastically different from, older Republicans. And they're, when it comes especially to issues like marijuana, same-sex marriage, immigration, they're really not that far off from their Democratic counterparts in terms of things like, I guess a big one that they're still very divided on is abortion. That's a huge one that still is just split down the middle. But in her conversation with some of these millennial Republicans, she did find that many of them were very quiet about their support for Trump and didn't even mention Trump in many of their speeches because they said, it's kind of this subconscious recognition that possibly in 10 years when they're running for higher office, and I don't know if it's maybe that the part of them that ignores the negative side of Trump, recognize that, hey, in 10 years, this could come back to bite me.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to, see that, and I don't even know if you would call it awareness. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more like paranoia because, like recently, the Chinese government has been trying to basically take control of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was this democracy in the middle of a communist country, and it was given by the UK, and with the understanding that they could basically be on their own and kind of like run it how they did under the UK leadership. And in the last about year, there's been just horrendous stories of them suppressing anybody that's fighting against the communist powers in Hong Kong. And one of the stories, the scariest stories probably that I read, was that the government was using Facebook posts to basically charge people with crimes against the government, and that people who were fighting back against it were mad racing to delete everything that they wrote on Facebook so that they wouldn't be taken by this, So I think there's kind of a lesser fear in the US that, I mean, hopefully lesser, that, that at the very least, post that you wrote, when you were 18 or something is going to come back and bite you, when you're 60. And because of our cancel culture, we're not going to have any context as to what you were talking about.
Isn't it interesting, though? I mean, our parents were not raised hearing the message, be careful what you put online, be careful what you put online, be careful your employers are going to see it, this is going to get you in the future. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I was raised hearing that over and over. My mom still thinks that private Facebook messages are like on your feed. I'm like, Mom, nobody can see what I private message someone. So it will be really interesting to see how kind of having an online history and persona shapes politicians and politics going forward. Are we going to care more or less? You know what I mean? Are we going to care less because everyone's dirty, laundry is out there, or are we going to use it to hold people accountable more? It'll be interesting.
And so,
real quick, the Back to the Future, the guy who wrote Back to the Future, he had a really great article that he released that was basically trying to predict the next 30 years. This was back in, I think, 2015. Because the joke was that the movie Back to the Future predicted quite a few of things that actually ended up happening. So they asked him, go ahead and predict what's going to happen the next 30 years. The best thing that he said in the whole article was, he said that because of the internet, he hoped that there would be, that people would feel less shame for writing and being who they are, but they would probably be less open.
Yeah, and that's fair. All right, guys, so that is it on time for our first part on the young and the political. Tune in for part 2. We're going to have, actually, he's 1 year less than a millennial, but nonetheless, he's a great example of what we're talking about. His name is Daniel Carlino. He ran for a local office in Missoula, Montana. And he's going to be on to discuss his experience, discuss his perspective on young people running for office. But if you want to get a hold of us, shoot us an email at pwbnetwork@gmail.com. Check out the website at podcastwithoutborders.com. Curtis, Kara, y'all have anything to plug at the end of this episode?
Yes. Vote. Go vote in your local elections. Go read about the people that you're going to vote for. I don't care if it's in line. I don't care if it's 3 bullets that, the local newspaper puts out. Go vote, okay?
Yeah, definitely. The more boring the election, the more you should vote. That's my like motto.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because you know what? Less people are going to vote against whatever you're voting for, and your vote's going to matter more. So, I don't care. It's going to be just the city election or whatever. You go out and vote. You vote like it was presidential.
Pay
Go
attention.
vote like it's your constitutional right and your duty, because it is.
Your civic duty. Well, and we'll get into this. Okay, no, we'll get into this into part 2 of this episode. So, yeah, I guess tune in. Thanks, y'all. Thank you for listening to Social Discord, part of the Podcast Without Borders Network. You can get a hold of us by sending us an email at pwbnetwork@gmail.com. You can also check out our website at podcastwithoutborders.com. Thanks for listening.